Welcome to another glorious episode of React Native Radio Podcast. Brought to you by Apple Vision Pro. Because my life will seem way more awesome when I look at it through a pair of $3,500 goggles. Episode 269. Nice. React Native VisionCamera V3 with Marc Rousavy.
Mazen, have you ever been to Germany or Austria before?
As long as the airport in Frankfurt counts, yes.
You know what? I'll count that. You must be basically fluent in German by this point.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely. We're going to do this episode in German.
Yeah.
Is that why?
Yeah. Well, let's try. Yeah, let's try. No, I took 2 years of German in high school, but it's so bad and my pronunciation is so horrible that our guest, who I will introduce in a bit, was cringing when he heard me say anything in German. So I'm not even going to say it. I'm not even going to try. But I did spend like a week in Germany and it was fun. Like I was doing a road trip. So that was really cool. But our guest is not from Germany. He's from Austria. Marc, you speak German though, right? Like that's your native language.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the same thing, but it's not really. So it's kind of like a, southern accent in Austria.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's Austrian German. So it's like a little different flavor of it. Okay. That makes sense.
Right. But the people in Munich, for example, they speak basically the same kind of accent.
I don't know why, but I'm absolutely fascinated by accents and dialects in other languages. I don't really care about English, like whatever, but other languages I find endlessly fascinating, the different dialects. And sometimes they turn into like full other languages, even though they're pretty similar. So yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Any chance you're a football fan, or soccer as we call it, in this great country?
I am kinda. So, I'm not really, we don't really have a strong national, team in Austria. But I, watched the World Cup and everything.
Well, thank you and the Austrians for Marcel Sabitzer. He's a very good player.
Yeah, agreed, yeah.
I knew Mazen was going to try to weave in sports in here. Hey, let the record show it wasn't me this time.
Yes.
I did spend a week in Germany and my 2 years of high school German where I got a C and I got like all A's other than that in high school. But German was tough for me. It actually came in handy. I was able to have a conversation with an Uber driver who didn't speak English. That was kind of fun, even though it was just, like asking where he was from and how long he'd been in Berlin and stuff.
So do you know how to say, you speak a little bit of German if someone asks you if you speak any German?
I don't. Like I would say, what would it be? Okay, I'm going to embarrass myself in front of 5,000, 6,000 people, many of whom are Germans or speak German.
Oh,
but
no.
Like I would probably say something like nicht so viel.
Oh, that's good, actually. That's good, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it was actually that was kind of surprising. That was actually good.
What does that translate?
I would say like.
Is that like so-so?
You said what? Nicht so viel?
Nicht so viel.
Yeah, it means not so much. Just kind of like a little bit. If you want to directly translate just a little bit, then it would be ein kleines bisschen.
A small amount.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah, that's what most people say.
Eine being a, or yeah, eine kleine I mean it's small.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Klein
Okay.
and small.
Yeah. So I probably know more, and that was actually the thing I found out when I was traveling through Germany was that when I would read signs and stuff, I could actually read a lot of them, and I could actually understand, and there were more words than I expected to know. But it was just more maybe the confidence, and it was also just sort of gluing it all together that was tough for me.
Yeah, I mean, at least it's like the same letters, right? If you like were to go to Russia or something like that, or I don't know, China, that's a bit more tricky.
I also learned some Finnish because my mom, like that was her first language was Finnish, but she never taught us. So, but she also knew like a very old dialect of Finn, like over 100 years old. Like that was her. Because that's when my ancestors moved to America, was very long ago. And so their dialect survived.
So they were from Finland?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Originally from Finland. My mom's 100% Finnish. So yeah, that was pretty cool to learn a little bit of Finnish. And now if I were to go back to Finland, I've been to Helsinki once, I would be able to at least communicate a little bit. But the thing is, most people speak English there. So I don't know. Just like your accent's like beautiful. You know, it's like awesome. Like you're amazing at English.
Me?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. Thank you.
I mean, you don't sound maybe like an American, but you know, like,
Yeah.
I'm always blown away by how good people's English is.
I mean, the funny thing is, like about, I speak, German during the day, and then, English if I talk to clients or, some people I work with. And then later in the day, my English skills kind of get, less and less good. So it's becoming harder for me to speak, the later it gets during the day. It's kind of weird to explain, but I mean, obviously you get a little bit tired, and everything.
Yeah.
And the first thing you notice is that, that your English skills kind of decrease, I would say. But, for me, it's like 6 p.m. right now, which is fine. But yeah.
Is it like coding? Like, does coding do the same thing? You start getting a little bit less effective as time goes on? Or do you do better coding at night?
Actually, no. I think coding is like, I don't want to say I can do it all day. That sounds kind of like nerdy, but I think I could do it like, for a very, very long time. Whereas, speaking English is something that, that's the first thing that's starting to fail.
Yeah.
Switching the context in your head is tough. Like switching the language context in your head all the time is tough.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing I wanted to ask you. You said have you been to Finland often?
Just once. I went to Helsinki and gave a talk there at React Finland.
Okay, so I see. Because there's, I think, I'm not sure how big of a thing it is there, but I see a lot of people going there to, for snow drifting. There's this one Austrian YouTuber who went there. I'm not sure if it was Finland or some other Scandinavian country. I'm not too sure about that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they all go there, with their Mitsubishi Evos, Nissan GTRs, and everything, and just do like lots of snow drifting there. I always wanted to try that. I mean, we have a little bit of snow here in Austria, and drifting is always possible here, but it's not as cool like as on a frozen lake or something like that.
Oh man, yeah. Yeah, that'd be amazing. Yeah. Northern Finland or really anywhere if it's cold enough.
Yeah.
No, Finland was great. It was cold. It was like April. So it was about this time of year and it was very cold.
Yeah,
it was really cool. I really liked it. I should do intros. So I'm Jamon Holmgren. I am your host and friendly CTO of Infinite Red. I live in the USA, Pacific Northwest with my wife and 4 kids. And I am joined today by my unparalleled co-host, Mazen Chami, lives in Durham, North Carolina with his wife and baby boy. He is a former pro soccer player and coach and is a senior React Native engineer here at Infinite Red. With us today is Marc Rousavy. He is the CEO at Margello, and Marc is an Austrian full stack developer, not Australian, for those of you in America. Those are 2 different countries. Although he does apparently have some Australian in his background, which is really weird, but he's Austrian, full stack developer. He excels in mobile apps, backends, and AI, which is kind of fun. Very similar to me. Works a lot with UI UX. He's done C++, Node.js, and of course React Native. He created popular open source libraries, one of which we're going to be talking about today, and of course also the CEO of the elite app development agency Margello. And Marc and I have been connected on Twitter for quite some time. Really happy to have you on, Marc.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Before we get started, I want to say that this episode is sponsored by Infinite Red. Infinite Red is a premier React Native design development agency located fully remote in the US and Canada. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your next React Native project, hit us up at infinite.red/React Native. And don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast. All right, let's get into our topic for today. Marc, you made React Native VisionCamera, and we're going to be talking about version 3. But before we get into that, I want to ask you, how did you get into coding? You're a fairly young guy, but you've been doing this for a little while now. How did you get into it?
I guess it's kind of tricky to answer. I mean, I'm 22 now. I'm turning 23 next month. So I'm fairly young, and I guess I kind of got into coding through like video games. So I was always like a big fan of like, Call of Duty and those kinds of games. And I, obviously the small kid playing video games, you always wanted to be like I always wanted to be a game developer, which is a very unrealistic career. But yeah, so I always wanted to do that. And I decided to go to, like, we have this, whole different school system here in Austria where you go to, I guess it would be high school for you guys, when you're in which school are you when you're like 17?
That would be high school.
Yeah. So if you go to high school, you have this one like exam at the end, right? I guess finals would be for you, which is kind of like almost university already. You know, it's kind of like a bachelor's degree almost, but not really, right? So there's this one thing where you can, you know, which is enough to get a very good job. And then additionally, you can go to uni, which I didn't do. I mean, I went to uni for 3 days, but yeah, whatever. So yeah, I went into a school where you know get this like, you know, IT background, and you know you learn lots of IT and have this one, you know, IT exam as well. And there's different, you know, subjects for IT. We had like data systems and, you know, software development and all those kinds of subjects. And yeah, so I went to that school, and I think the first 2-3 years maybe, so it's like 5 years in total. The first 2-3 years, I wasn't interested in, you know, programming at all. And I wasn't really good at school at this point. So I had like, you know, bad grades and everything. But then in summer, my dad was like, "Yo, you need to get a job and everything," you know. And then I you know, thought, yeah, why not get a, you know, developer job? And I found a job where I did C# for like a big corporation here, and I kind of liked C#. I was like, oh, this language is actually cool. It's kind of like the cooler, you know, Java. And I started doing lots of C#. I started writing, you know, kind of like annoying trolling software, not really viruses, but like annoying software was the first thing that actually, you know, made lots of fun. And those kind of spread around school, right? There was at one point I had this one big, you know, annoying troll software where I could fully control other people's laptops, and even the teacher had it, right? So I was like, it was very, very bad. So it was a full privacy violation and everything. But yeah, that was fun. That was kind of when I got into programming. And so after school, you know, we have this thing in Austria where you have to do 1 year of military or civil service. I did civil service where I was a paramedic for 1 year, and I kind of got bored during that job. You know, sometimes you just sit there and wait until, you know, there's an alarm or something, and when there's nothing happening, you don't have anything to do. And I wanted to build an app. So that's how I got into app development. I started doing Swift first. I wanted to build like a cocktail mixer app where you can, you know, film a glass, and it tells you how much you have to put in to mix a perfect cocktail. So a really tricky app as a first app. It was already camera related. So I guess this kind of moves into another topic then in a second. But yeah, I didn't manage to release that because it was just too tricky at that point. But I got, you know, into app development. I then changed to React Native because I wanted to, you know, make it cross-platform as well. And then I started doing like a used goods marketplace app, so kind of like Craigslist or whatever, but for Austria. And yeah, then I joined a startup, and yeah, during that startup, I started working on some of the libraries that we know today. So React Native MMKV, VisionCamera, and React Native Blur Hash, some other libraries as well. And yeah, that's how I kind of got into React Native and programming in general.
How'd you start Margello? Because that's a very young age to be starting an agency. I started mine when I was 23. So, you know, I wasn't much older than you, but I was, you know, a little older than you. How did you start Margello?
So I did join the startup at that time. I worked for that startup, and, you know, it wasn't like a very early startup. It wasn't going to be successful. But at that time I thought, you know, why not try it? And I didn't earn any money. So, yeah, it was kind of like a, you know, bit of a tricky time at that point. But I made all of those libraries. I put in like countless of hours. I think I had like a point where I was like at 100 or 80 hours a week or something like that, which is like insane, right? Yeah. And that was, you know, what is it called? Summer break, I guess. Yeah. And so yeah, I worked a lot. I did all of those libraries, and then the startup failed. So I was like, well, yeah, what do I do now? And at that time, my libraries and my Twitter was kind of, you know, becoming more popular, and, you know, the libraries gained lots of traction, and lots of people started using React Native Blur Hash, MMKV, and VisionCamera. And actually, I think VisionCamera, it was around the time when I was about to, or when I published VisionCamera. So, you know, React Native, MMKV, and Blur Hash gained lots of traction, and my Twitter gained lots of traction as well. And I kind of teased VisionCamera there a bit, and then I released VisionCamera, and then everything started to explode. So there was like, you know, lots of companies DM'd me. I think, you know, Microsoft and all those kinds of big companies just reached out to me, and they were like, yo, we saw your libraries and whatever. Like, you know, real personal DMs, not like the normal job offers you get on LinkedIn. So I was like, oh wow, okay, so this is actually a very, I would say it's a volatile, is that how you pronounce it? Volatile space, yeah. But it was so fast moving that, I was like, okay, you can really, pull something there, you can really invent something there. And I started, putting more effort into those libraries. And at first it sounds stupid, right? If you try to explain this concept to other people, you put countless of hours into an open source project, you basically upload your code and everybody can use it for free. You get GitHub sponsors. I got lots of GitHub sponsors. So huge shout out to everyone who's sponsoring me on GitHub.
That's
I love
awesome.
you all. But it's not going to, at the end of the day, it's not going to pay for like rent and everything, but it is good amount of support. So it becomes really interesting though when, lots of companies or bigger companies, start using your libraries, right? So there's, that's the whole idea of React Native. Everything is open source. Everything is like a third-party library, with the lean core concept. So everybody pulls in another library, and then there's like multiple people maintaining multiple aspects of the ecosystem. So for me, it was like MMKV, the local storage kind of alternative for React Native, and cameras. So I did VisionCamera, and basically at that point, VisionCamera was already, it had more features than all the other camera libraries, but we can talk about that in a second. So every app that had a camera, every React Native app that had a camera, kind of thought about using VisionCamera. So that was the point when, I got lots of job offers and I was like, okay, I really want to work for, basically all of those companies or most of those companies, but I don't want to decide which one I want to, work with all the time. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do some freelance work. The first project that I actually worked for was ClipDrop, which is a French AI startup, which allowed you, and I think everybody has seen it at this point. This is the top post on Reddit on r/React Native of all time, where they have their camera and they scan like this flower pot and then hold onto it, then move over to the laptop and release the finger, and it pastes it, with a cutout onto the screen, which is
I've
insane.
seen that. It's amazing.
Yeah, you've seen that. It feels like magic. And I worked for them. I built a quick editor for them, which is a native module and everything. And yeah, so this was also the point where I was like, okay, I think my area of interest is native module development. I really like React Native. I'm really good at, building apps and writing efficient, JavaScript code and clean types and everything. But I'm mostly interested in this native kind of structure and then abstracting things. So I was like, okay, API design is what I want to do. Then I joined Expo for also a very short duration. I was I think 2 months at Expo. Because Charlie DM'd me. Charlie's a really amazing guy. I'm not sure if have you talked to Charlie before?
Yeah. Charlie and I are fairly close. He's awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, yeah. No, Charlie's absolutely awesome. I met him in San Francisco actually in January. So yeah, and then I worked at Expo. But yeah, I think after that I decided to just create an agency or make this kind of this freelancing more like a group project almost. So it was all very organically, right? I was like, okay, I have too many clients right now, too much traction. I want to do everything. I know a few people through Twitter. I was like, yo, let's do this together. Let's do 3 projects at a time. And then we're 3 people. And then we kept growing. And then this kind of structure formed around it. And now, we have an office here in Vienna. We have employees. We have an assistant. We have, HR. And she's doing HR as well. We have accounting and everything. So it's kind of organically. But at the same time, it's also this kind of very specific market that we, fit in.
How big is the company? How many people?
So we're 11 in total. We have most of our, teammates are under freelance contracts because that's, I think, the simplest approach for working together.
Right.
And then in Vienna, we are 5 people.
Okay. I mean, that's really good. You're on an accelerated timeline. I didn't get my first employee until I was probably, I was probably 26, 27, something like that. And then I grew up to about 12 people by the time I was, I think, 30. So it took me a little longer to get to where you are. That's amazing. You're doing great.
It's going very fast. Yeah. It's kind of cool, but also kind of scary,
It's a little scary.
If it can go up fast, it can also go down fast.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I'm just, my role here in this company is making sure that everything's stable, everything works, and we're on the right track.
Fantastic job.
That's pretty cool. I mean, running a company and then
Thank you.
Doing all these open source stuff. I kind of mentioned it in the chat a little bit earlier. Your name sounded very familiar. And then when you mentioned MMKV, I was like, that's where I've heard your name before. That's a pretty cool library. But anyways, We're shifting to Vision Camera here. What's the inspiration? Like, what inspired you to actually build that library in the first place? Because it sounds like a very niche one. You don't have a lot of apps that necessarily use the camera, but when they do, they rely on it heavily, right? So what inspired you to kind of do that one, niche, like specific?
So, everything was kind of, as I said before, everything was kind of organically. So in a startup, in the first startup that I joined, we kind of our main competitor was Snapchat. Okay. So it was already very tricky to succeed. But yeah, we wanted to have a camera that's, high quality, starts really, really fast, can, do all those kinds of like modern things that a Snapchat and Instagram camera can do. And, if you just think about a camera right now, it might sound very simple, right? But then if you use, for example, React Native Camera or React Native Camera Kit, in React Native Camera Kit, you can't even record videos. It's very simple and it's very cool for taking photos and everything. It's a cool library. And I took actually lots of inspiration from it. But then you can't really record videos. And then we took a look at React Native Camera, and in React Native Camera, you can record videos, but it's, a bit tricky. Some things are kind of broken. It was unmaintained at that time already. And then we found all those kinds of like very, very specific things. For example, if you record a video on Snapchat and then double tap the screen, it continues the recording and flips the camera. And then it records from the front camera or from the back camera, which sounds simple, but that's not an out-of-the-box feature. And that's really, really hard to implement because... So I don't want to get into too much technical stuff, but just this as an example, right? This was one thing that was really annoying for our, CEO at the time. He was like, "Yo, this should work," and I'm like, I thought it would work out of the box, but then I took a look at the, native iOS code, and the way you implement video recording was by using this AV capture video file delegate, and you just start a recording, it writes to a file, and then it stops it. And if you want to switch or flip the camera, you can't really do that because the video capture output is bound to the camera input. So you can't really, continue the recording there. You could use some magic, like, stopping the recording and starting it again, but then you lose some frames and some video frames and audio frames. And it gets really, really tricky. So what we had to do was implementing AV capture video data output delegate, which is receiving buffers, like the raw video buffers and raw audio buffers, and then manually write those buffers to the file. So, building a new media encoder. There's some helpers there in the iOS framework, but, as you can probably imagine, that's like lots of lines of code just for this one simple or seemingly simple feature. So yeah, all those kinds of features kind of summed up. What else was it? I think, recording while music or Spotify's playing, that's also something that's really tricky to do with React Native Camera. And then we just decided, okay, React Native Camera also doesn't have any filters, or custom filters. I think there's like sepia color filters or something like that, but not like, 3D masks and everything. So I was like, okay, this isn't enough for our, use case. So we need to build our own camera library. And that's what I did. So I created a new native module. I did have some experience at that time, from React Native MMKV and Blur Hash. But yeah, that's kind of how, we built VisionCamera. At this time, it was still, a private native module. But I built everything very generically. And, me loving API design, I was like, okay, I can make this very generic. I can make this work for every use case. Because, some people might want just photo. Some people just want to record video. Some people want to record GIFs, so video without audio. And some people might want it to start really, really fast. So that's when you don't want to use video stabilization, because that's a hardware feature and also takes time to boot up. So all those kinds of very, very specific things, right? And I could really, be a nerd and talk about all of those kinds of very, very specific things. But that's, way too much for a single podcast right now. But yeah, I think the video stabilization is a good example. So there's like 3 stages, off, on, and hardware. And, the video stabilization being off obviously starts the quickest. That's how it works in Snapchat. So if you record a video and you have shaky hands, it's actually shaking a lot. If you record the same video on Instagram, which is a similar camera to Snapchat, it has basic video stabilization, but it starts a little bit slower than Snapchat. Difference being that Snapchat's main or home screen is the camera, so that's why it needs to be as fast as possible. And on Instagram, it's one separate step, away. And then the most tricky video stabilization is obviously hardware, which takes like almost, I think, 2 seconds or something like that on my iPhone 11 to start up. And that's the cinematic mode on your stock camera app. So yeah, all those kinds of very specific features made me build a separate module for that and pack all of that under a nice and easy to use API.
That's pretty cool. And I mean, you just mentioned some things that make VisionCamera stand out from the core ones that are available out there, which is amazing. And your documentation is also very well written. So I think that's very helpful for developers out there trying to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So V2 is out right now, and I see your work. You're currently working on V3. I want to say something real quick that you posted. I think it was you that posted this, right? Let me find it. Yes, you posted this. And I think this is amazing for people that aren't native developers or maintainers of libraries that are working on, that pull in, all you do is NPM, yarn add, VisionCamera, follow the docs on the first page, and you're done. Well, for those people, one thing you posted on here was V3, how much code is involved in V3. And I think some people should hear these stats, because this is incredible for you to be doing this in your spare time at the same time. So if you wanted to build an app from purely native, you're talking about 700 lines of codes across 5 files. In addition, 300 lines of very low level C style code, about 40 lines of metal shader code. I don't know what that means, but that's still 40 more lines than I know. 30 lines of code to set up face detector. Meanwhile, on the other hand, if you are using VisionCamera, it's 4 lines of code, 35 lines of code for face detector, and 13 lines of code for frame processing. You add all those up, there's no competition there. So I think that's an amazing stat there. And this is all coming from, I'm assuming, V3. So what is, for me as someone who's developing an app and leveraging this library, what are the benefits for me to move from V2 to V3? What am I gaining? What new features are available for us? So
in V2, VisionCamera, aims to provide all of the basic camera features that you want to use in an app like Snapchat and Instagram, but without the filters aspect. Okay. And for V3, I guess the biggest feature is filters. And with filters, I mean, there's different kinds of filters that you can do in a camera app. So first of all, there's very simple color filters, which are, I think, possible with React Native Camera as of today. I'm not sure about that, but okay. I think it is something like a sepia color filter or something like that. Then there's some 2D filters, let's say you wanna draw a rectangle around a face and update that in real time. If it's face tracking me, or blurring a face, for example, or if maybe you want to build a real time license plate blurring app, so that every time you look at a car's license plate, it automatically blurs the plate. And then there's 3D filters, which are really, really tricky. There's, completely separate modules for that. So on iOS, you wouldn't use a normal AV capture session or camera or whatever. You would use this AR kit, session that you set up, and, then it sets up all kinds of 3D context, and then you have your models in there and then bind them to faces and have these landmark points. And VisionCamera V3 aims to support basic filters and the 2D filters. For 3D filters, I don't think that there's a way to build that into the camera library that's also, I guess, without compromising without compromising performance. And, I guess maintenance speed as well. Because if I actually implement 3D filters in VisionCamera, then I would have 2 separate camera sessions, and then something video stabilization won't work in the 3D filter session, but only works in a 2D filter session. So that's I think where you can draw the line. If you really need 3D filters, then I guess this just can't be done in a simple module that can do everything. So I guess this is where you have to draw the line. 3D filters are something you have to build yourself and make them specifically for your app. But VisionCamera V3 aims to support basic filters and 2D filters, and all of this is powered by Skia actually. So I'm very active in the ecosystem, obviously, and everybody wants to use the latest tech and everything. So this is kind of the philosophy I have with VisionCamera as well. It is a lean core concept, so there's not, it doesn't even have a face detector in there, so you can build everything using a frame processor plugin. And I'm kind of mentioning lots of different things right here, but it all makes sense in a second. Sorry. So with the lean core concept and React Native Skia integration, you can combine the two, and if you want to enable this feature, you can set up a Skia canvas for, or a Skia preview view, I would say, for drawing stuff onto the camera per se. This means, whereas right now you have this one camera component, which is, kind of like the preview view on your, in your app, and you see what the camera sees. If you want to draw stuff onto that camera view, you have to set up a separate canvas and everything, and that's what this integration allows you to do. So it allows you to set up a React Native Skia canvas, and then you get the frame, and inside the frame's coordinate, let's say the frame is a 4K frame, you can draw, for example, if you run a face detector module, you can draw a rectangle box around the user's face. Previously, you would have to, show a separate view on top of the camera view in the React Native view coordinate system and move this box around with screen coordinates, which is hacky and not really embedded in the, in the recording as well. So yeah, this is one thing that it allows you to do. And again, as I said, you can also do blur, like license plate blurring or VHS filters, for example. There's some, Snapchat also has some VHS filters and distortion and, some text on there, or inverting colors, sepia filters, all those kinds of things that you can do with Skia, you can also do in VisionCamera then. And yeah, I think this also includes beauty filters. It will also probably be very, very simple to implement. And the good thing about this is that it builds a foundation, or it provides a foundation that allows you to embed all of this in the preview and in the recording and in the final photo as well. So yeah, let's say you want to blur something on a license plate. You can see that on the screen in real time at 60 FPS or maybe even 120 FPS. You can take a photo and it's still blurred in a photo. And you can also record a video. And the thing about photo is it's a different resolution, obviously, than a preview view. And you can also embed it in the video where it's already pre-recorded. There's no after processing. There's no post-processing to it. You record it directly, frame by frame. Yeah. And then, with V3, I was like, okay, I'm doing a new version. But what about the people that don't use those kinds of 2D filters? Because it's a very small user base, I would say. So I was like, okay, let's also build a bunch of other features. So sync from frame processors, that's the second thing. It's required for drawing onto a frame, because you can't draw asynchronously, you have to draw synchronously. So frame processors will be synchronous, meaning everything you do blocks the next frame from coming in. This has lots of benefits, obviously, but also a drawback. If you want to do some very long processing, then it needs to be async. If you want to do some complex face detection or post detection, and this cannot run at the same time that the camera can run, then you need to run it asynchronously. And for this, I implemented also a helper function called run async. And you also have a function called run at target FPS, which allows you to throttle, I guess, a Lambda function as well. Then we have, React Native 0.71 benefits with a much simpler build setup. We're up to date with the latest React Native version. I'm thinking about making it a turbo module, but then this would kind of, block lots of users that are not yet using turbo modules from using it. So this is maybe just a, version 3.1 thing. Yeah, and then we have also two more interesting things. Three more very interesting things. So first is a new declarative API for device and format selection. I think this is something that we can talk about here as well, because the way I'm not sure, have you guys used VisionCamera before?
Yes. Jamon hasn't, but I have.
Okay, so did you select a very specific device, like a camera device, or did you just use the default device?
Default.
Okay, so I think this is what most people do. I think most people just use a default camera device. But, if you have what kind of phone do you guys have?
I have an iPhone 12, I think it is.
12, okay.
Yeah.
So on an iPhone 12 and on my iPhone 11 Pro and any, I guess, latest iPhone, you have multiple cameras and you have multiple capture devices, actually. So, for example, I'm holding my iPhone 11 Pro here. On the front side, I have actually, I think, I have two cameras on the front side. I have this FaceTime front camera. And I have the Face ID, is it infrared, I guess, device. And on the back, I have three more cameras. which is the wide angle. This is like the normal or default camera that everybody uses. Then we have the ultra wide angle, which is the, fisheye effect, like the zoomed out or 0.5 camera. And then I have a telephoto camera, which is the, more zoomed in camera. So if you zoom into 2x or 3x, then it switches to this camera, which is, it has a different field of view and better quality at a zoomed in state. Right. So there's 3 cameras. I think most apps and all React Native or all other React Native camera libraries just use the default camera. So that's the wide angle on the front and the wide angle on the back. There's no way of zooming out to the ultra wide angle or the telephoto camera. In VisionCamera there is, because you can, like, the user is in full control over which device he selects. And it gets even more interesting because there's also virtual camera devices. For example, on my iPhone 11 Pro, on the back side, there's this like virtual or logical device that's called the multicam. And that's all three devices combined together. So I can just start in the normal wide angle camera, which is like the camera everybody uses, and then smoothly zoom out, and it automatically switches under the hood without, any black screen or anything, to the ultra wide angle camera, which is the default behavior that you have in your camera app. So if you open your camera app and then zoom out, it automatically switches the cameras. And this is, it's not tricky to implement with VisionCamera. You can just use, you can just find the multi-camera device and then just use that, pass it to VisionCamera, and it automatically sets everything up for you.
That's pretty cool. I just learned something new today.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's the type of thing where, like, when you think about this library, you probably wouldn't even think about that as being like a whole thing that you have to think about.
Yeah.
But it's like when you actually try to implement these features, then the complexity starts coming through.
Yeah, and based on what you mentioned, I assume once you capture a picture or a video, you're getting a higher resolution image at the end of the day. Is that correct?
Yeah. If the preview that you see on your screen is like a small, like it's a different type of input that's streaming in from the hardware sensor, and when you take a picture, that's a separate, I guess, call to the native hardware sensor, which is a higher resolution image, and that's delegated through the actual camera that you are given, or with the given zoom state right now, and then it resolves with a high resolution picture. There's also like multiple different steps or configuration options there. You can tell on iOS, you can tell the camera session what you want to prioritize, speed or quality, or I guess there's also like a in-between balanced mode. But yeah, there's lots of configuration there. You can tell iOS to also deliver, like, I think the delegate has like 7 steps. So you can have the state where I think there's a callback for before flash, while flash, and after flash. And then, before take picture, then there's like the, raw data available callback. Then there's like the depth data callback. And then there's like the actual picture callback. Mm-hmm. And then there's the, I think shutter effect is also a callback, when exactly the point when a shutter effect is being called. So all those kinds of things, you get callbacks for that. And then you can decide what you actually want to do. So one also, fun, I'm dropping a lot of fun facts here. One fun fact, the iOS camera app, when you take a picture, it saves or it screenshots the preview view and puts it in the, bottom left corner, because the high resolution picture isn't fully available yet. And this way it seems like the picture is taken quicker. So that's also
really
one fun
cool
fact that you can work with.
That's a neat, like user experience affordance. That's really neat.
Yeah. Remind me to talk about the Snapchat trick later when we talk about Android, because that's, I think, the coolest fun fact I know.
It's all smoke and mirrors, isn't it?
So, you can select different devices depending on what you actually want to achieve, right? As we said before, there's, multiple camera devices available on your phone. The 0.5x camera, the ultra wide angle camera, is also, not very suitable for, I guess, low light conditions. And I guess in most cases, you really just want to use the 1x camera by default, or the wide angle camera by default, because, adding multiple cameras to your camera session, so using the multicam device, also increases startup time. So if you really want to use, or if you really want to allow the user to zoom out or zoom into the different camera devices, there is a compromise in performance. And that's what VisionCamera is about. I want to have the user decide what he actually wants to do. If the user wants to prioritize speed, like on Snapchat, then he will probably only want to select the wide angle camera, and he will, disable video stabilization. And the same thing also applies to formats. So on one phone, you have N devices, and per device, you have N formats. So let's say I take the default wide-angle back camera on my iPhone 11 Pro. I think there's, 30, 40 formats available. And there's like a format with a resolution of 192 by 192, which is like a very, very small, like a, thumbnail resolution. And then there's like 5K formats, and then ProRes, and some formats record in, different photo resolutions, different video resolutions. Some, have very, very high photo resolutions, but then low frame rates because they can't stream in all of this like resolution at like 60 FPS. And some have like lower resolution. So for example, there's like a full HD format, but you can record in 240 FPS. And then VisionCamera provides an API, or an, easy to use API, to actually select a different device or a different format depending on what, your app wants to do. If you don't want to record any videos, then you don't need to look for formats that have high FPS or, good video quality or something like that. Your primary focus would be photo resolution. So it is up to the user to filter the formats, and you get all of that through like one single API call. To get all of the formats and filter through them, and then pass the matching format to the camera component. And by default, it uses the default most, best matching format or whatever, which works in every case probably. This is like a very advanced feature. And I want to make that simpler, even simpler to use. Right now, you have to imperatively sort the formats and find the best matching one. I want to make that even simpler, maybe by using like a builder format. So I haven't quite thought that out yet. But something like, format dot, where, I don't know, something like quality is highest and FPS is highest and not photo quality is highest, something like that. And then we have two more interesting features. So that's the Android rewrite. On Android, I use Camera X. Okay, there's 3 different libraries on Android for cameras. On iOS, there's just this one AV Foundation. You use that, it gets improved. That's it. On Android, there's 3 libraries. There's Camera 1, Camera 2, and Camera X. Whereas Camera X is kind of built on Camera 2. So in reality, there's two hardware abstraction layers. That's like Camera 1 and Camera 2. There is a Camera 3 hardware abstraction layer, but that's what Camera 2 uses. So it gets really complicated, but in reality, there's 3 libraries that you can use, or 3 official libraries that you can use, and Camera X is the easiest to use, Camera 2 is the hardest to use, and Camera 1 is deprecated. With Camera 2, you have more flexibility with the compromise of, some devices not working, some devices like some Huawei devices requiring some workarounds, and some custom patches, and it's really hard to use. But yeah, I use Camera X for now, and I want to rewrite it to Camera 2, which is going to be a huge pain. But yeah, I think I need to do that to, support, because right now you can't record slow motion on Android, and that's kind of annoying me. So I really want, that to also work on Android, and for that I need Camera 2. And then this is like, a very big under the hood change, which allows many more features and much more stability to also work on Android. But then with the compromise of some features that worked before not working again, and requiring me to build a fix afterwards. So it's gonna be a tricky transition, but yeah, it's gonna be fun. And then lastly, I wanna replace the worklet runtime or make it more stable to integrate the whole frame processor thing. So right now I'm using Reanimated, and I built frame processors around Reanimated v2, which required a bunch of changes in the Reanimated repo. And so, huge shout out to the software mention guys for reviewing my PRs and getting stuff merged and helping me and answering my questions.
Yeah, they're great.
Yeah, they're amazing. It was a huge help. But yeah, so so VisionCamera depends on Reanimated v2 to provide worklets. A frame processor is a worklet. I'm not sure, I'm just quickly going to explain what it is. If you have your camera component and you want to add some kind of frame processing, so this is a very generic topic, like let's say face detection, maybe even hand detection, pose detection, number plate scanning, or even QR code scanning, all those kinds of things, or even like WebRTC, like you want to upload, your frame to implement a video chat like FaceTime. All those kinds of things require you to process the frames the camera sees. And before VisionCamera, so like, let's say React Native Camera Kit, this was not possible. So what you had to do is either implement your own native camera module or patch React Native Camera with a, very custom code. And, we all hate patches or forks. So with VisionCamera and worklets, all of this changed, because I implemented a feature where you can write a function called a frame processor. It's this one hook. It's called use frame processor that gets called on every frame the camera sees. So if your camera runs at 60 FPS or even 240 FPS or 30 FPS, whatever, this function gets called for every single frame, and you receive the frame as a parameter, which is magic. It's, if you think about it, it's like, it's mind blowing. It's real magic. The frame, you know, if you have a 4K camera, that's like a 10 megabyte buffer each frame. That getting sent
incredible.
to your, yeah, it's getting sent to, you know, JavaScript basically. So you have a new 10 megabyte buffer allocated on a GPU, 10 megabytes per frame on each frame. You know, if you 60 times a second, that's insane. The magic behind here is that the frame is a host object and it's, you know, not copying the frame at all. So you just have this one thin wrapper around the actual 10 megabyte GPU buffer, which allows you to access stuff on the frame. So if let's say, you know, we're all staying in JavaScript here, right? So the GPU buffer is coming from C++, and in JavaScript, you can do like frame.width and kind of just log that to the console. And on every frame, 60 times a second, or even 240 times a second, it outputs the frame width, which would be, let's say 4,000 something. And then you can also, in V3, fun fact, you can also convert the buffer to a JavaScript array buffer, which is obviously not really fast because it's copying from the GPU to the CPU into JavaScript. So that's obviously not recommended, but, you know, for debugging or for slower running operations, something like, if it's fine to run at like once a second or something like that, or maybe even like 20 times a second, you can do that.
Yeah, the picture you have, the GIF you have in the pull request, which we'll link in the show notes, you can actually see it in action with the code. It's just pretty cool how it just kind of overlays in this picture, like the red box on your face.
Yeah, that's one example of like, or the first draft that I got working. What a pretty exciting day for me when, you know, I integrated Skia into VisionCamera, and it kind of really showcases how simple frame processing in general, the general abstract topic, gets with React Native. And this is not just a library for React Native. This is like in general, you know, the whole AI and real-time processing space on mobile got way simpler with this, because it's way simpler to do this in React Native right now than in like native apps. I'm not sure how Flutter works in this area. I should probably take a look at that there, but this is like as simple as it gets right now. So
Mark, unfortunately we're running out of time here, but I've just been like soaking this in. This is unbelievable how much work you've done, and also how deep this topic goes. You wouldn't think like React Native VisionCamera, like you think about that and it's like, okay, how much depth can you get out of one particular feature, one particular library? But as you can see here, like we could probably go 2 or 3 podcast episodes and you still would have more to say. It's incredible. Like it's this, you know, obviously this is a passion too, because it kind of has to be in order to get this level of depth. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you. It's lots of stuff. It's interesting stuff, but at the same time, you know, it's just so many hours.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've known that like a lot of times people look at stuff like this and they'll be like, wow, you know, Mark is really talented, which is true. Like you are a talented developer, but a lot of it is hard work. It's a lot of hard work too. It's like people can do this. It's just a matter of, will you sit down and learn all the APIs and really think through like what the public API should look like. What should it look like? The interface between that and React Native, and how will you utilize JSI, and how will you utilize the bridge, and how will you kind of like handle the new architecture when it lands, and everything else. I really hate to interrupt you, but we are unfortunately out of time. Thanks so much, Mark, for coming on. And I know people are going to have more questions for sure. So where can people find you online so they can ask you more questions on Twitter or wherever else?
So if you want to ask React Native questions, you can, you know, follow me on Twitter at MROUSAVY, which is my name everywhere. So, you know, GitHub, Twitter, everything. And if you have some, you know, very specific camera questions, like, you know, 3D models and, you know, all those kinds of filter stuff, you can also send me an email. Everything is linked on my Twitter as well. So yeah, you'll find a way to contact me.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I'll post updates there as well on VisionCamera V3, and, you know, some fun GIFs to watch about some projects I built with VisionCamera, some examples.
Very cool. Well, I'd love to have you on at some point onto my Twitch channel when I do restart that. I do plan to do that. maybe you and I could hack on some camera stuff or even MMKV. You mentioned AI. I do want to make a little side note here. One of my first AI code mod experiments was making an AI that would convert a React Native project from async storage to React Native MMKV.
Oh, that's cool.
It actually worked. It actually did work. I was able to get it to work. I was kind of blown away.
Not bad.
Yeah. So I could show you that, and we could play around with that. Because I don't know if we've mentioned, but you created React Native MMKV. So that's relevant here. I do want to also say you can find React Native Radio at React Native RDIO. You can find Mazen at Mazen Chami and me at Jamon Holmgren on Twitter. You can also find me on Blue Sky, the new Blue Sky, at jamon.dev. Thanks so much to our guest, Marc, for joining us today. And as always, thanks to our producer and editor, Todd Worth, our assistant editor and episode release coordinator, Jed Bartowski, our designer, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Derek Greenberg. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/React Native. A special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure to subscribe. And Mazen, do you have a Robin's mom joke queued up?
I do.
Let's hear this. Let's get it over with.
You have to savor it, Jamon. What do you call a fish wearing a bow tie?
I don't know.
Sophisticated.
Sophisticated.
I need to do a better Sean Connery impression there. Yeah, but that one was brought to you by...
What does Sean Connery call a fish?
Yeah, that would be interested.
Weird about.
That was brought to you by Frank Tillis.
Thanks a lot, Frank. We really appreciate it. We'll see you all next time.
Bye.